The invitation arrived on a Thursday. Cream envelope, gold-embossed lettering, the kind of stationery that announces itself before you open it, that says this cost money, and this was chosen carefully, and this was meant to make you feel something specific. Her name was written across the front in calligraphy. Zola Mensa, not the name she had carried during the marriage. Her own name. Returned to her like an afterthought in the handwriting of a man who had once said it with love and had learned across 7 years of marriage to say it with something else entirely. The invitation was to the wedding of Marcus Ashford and Brittany Cole, her ex-husband, and the woman he had left her for. She stood in her kitchen in Atlanta on a Thursday morning with the invitation in her hand and 2 3-year-old children pulling at the hem of her robe and the coffee going cold on the counter. And she understood immediately what the invitation was. Not a gesture of goodwill, not a sign of maturity, an instrument, carefully designed, sent by a man who had spent 7 years making her feel small and had divorced her 14 months ago, and had apparently decided that the next logical step was to invite her to watch him publicly move on with someone younger, wealthier, and less complicated than she had been. He expected her to decline. Or worse, he expected her to come alone. He had not accounted for what 14 months could do to a woman who had decided after the divorce was finalized to stop shrinking. He had not accounted for Tobias Osei. He had not accounted for the twins. And he had not accounted for what it would look like when his ex-wife descended the stairs of a private jet onto the tarmac of the city where he was getting married, with a man beside her who made Marcus Ashford feel, for the first time in his life, genuinely small. This is the story of Zola Mensa, of what the marriage cost her, of what the divorce gave back, of what she built in 14 months when she finally stopped asking for permission, and of what happened at the wedding of Marcus Ashford on a Saturday in June that nobody in that room would forget. Stay until the end, because this story does not end at the wedding. What comes after is even better. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Before the marriage and before the divorce, and before the Thursday morning with the cream envelope, Zola Mensa had been a woman who filled rooms without trying. Not in the loud way, in the specific way of someone who was genuinely interested in the people around her, who listened before she spoke, who had the particular quality of making whoever she was talking to feel like the most important person in the conversation. She had grown up in Charlotte, North Carolina, the second of 3 daughters born to Ghanaian immigrant parents who had built a life with the particular intention of people who understand that nothing is given and everything must be constructed. Then her father had owned a small civil engineering consultancy. Her mother had been a registered nurse who worked nights for 12 years so her daughters could have opportunities she had not. Zola had not wasted those opportunities. She had a degree in graphic design from SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design, and a decade of experience in brand strategy that she had built from an internship into a senior creative director role at one of Atlanta's most respected design agencies. She was 39 years old when she met Marcus Ashford at a client event. He was handsome and well-dressed, and spoke about his real estate development company with the confidence of a man who had never had reason to doubt his own instincts. He had pursued her with the specific focused energy of someone who had identified exactly what he wanted. She had been cautious, but he had been patient. And patience deployed with intention is its own form of persuasion. They dated for 2 years before the wedding. In those 2 years, Marcus was everything a woman could want in a partner: attentive, present, apparently proud of her, apparently invested in her career and her life, and the specific texture of who she was. She had loved him. That part was always true. The love had been real. The marriage had also been real. Real in the specific way of something that starts with genuine feeling and then shifts, slowly, gradually, in ways that are impossible to name while they are happening, into something that looks like a marriage from the outside and functions like a slow erosion from within. The first sign was the career. Marcus had not asked her to leave the agency, and he had simply, persistently, consistently, gently expressed concern. "You work so hard. You deserve more support. I make enough for both of us. Why are you killing yourself for someone else's vision when you could be building something of your own?" It sounded like love. It was not love. It was the first wall. By year 3 of the marriage, she had left the agency and was attempting to build her own design studio from home, which Marcus supported, in theory. In practice, he was consistently skeptical of every decision she made, consistently available with reasons why her ideas would not work, consistently positioned as the realistic one, the practical one, the one who understood how the world actually functioned. She was, in his framing, the creative one, the dreamer, the one who needed managing. She had believed him for longer than she should have. Because when someone close to you tells you the same story about yourself for long enough, you begin to mistake their perception for the truth. Her best friend, Adaeze, had seen it years before Zola had. "He's not proud of you," Adaeze had said once over dinner, "in the direct way that only people who love you enough to lose you will speak. He's proud of being with you. Those aren't the same thing." Zola had defended Marcus. She always defended Marcus. Until year 6, when she stopped being able to construct the defense without noticing how much it was costing her. And then year 7. And then the divorce, which did not come with drama, which came, like most endings of long-hollowed things, now with a conversation over coffee in which Marcus said that he had been unhappy for a while and that he thought they both deserved more, and that someone new had appeared who made him feel something he had not felt in years. He had not mentioned Brittany's name that day. Zola had found it out from Adaeze, who had found it from Instagram, who had found a series of photographs that told a story that Marcus had been telling for at least 8 months before he had bothered to tell her. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in April, 14 months before the invitation. Zola had walked out of the lawyer's office with Adaeze beside her and gotten into the car and sat in the passenger seat for a very long time without speaking. Then she had said, "I need to build something." Adaeze had looked at her. "What kind of something?" "The kind I should have been building for the last 7 years. That was the beginning." The first month after the divorce was the hardest, not because she missed Marcus. She did miss him. Or rather, she missed the version of him that had existed in the first 2 years, the version she had fallen in love with, the version that turned out to be a performance so complete that even the performer had believed it for a while. But what made the first month hard was not grief for him. It was grief for herself, for the years she had spent making herself smaller to fit inside a marriage that had never truly had room for her, for the agency she had left, for the studio she had half built and abandoned, for the decade of expertise she had accumulated and then systematically undervalued because the person closest to her needed her to undervalue it. She had a lot to grieve. She allowed herself exactly 3 weeks of it. Then she opened her laptop, and she started over. The design studio was called Mensa Creative. Not Ashford, not anything hyphenated. Mensa. Her name. Her parents' name, the name she had returned to the moment the divorce was final. She had been building toward this for years, not consciously, not with a plan, but in the way certain things build themselves in the background of your life when your foreground is occupied by someone else's needs. She had contacts, a decade of them, as accumulated across her years at the agency and the years of her marriage when she had maintained professional relationships, even as Marcus subtly discouraged them. She had a portfolio that was, by any objective measure, exceptional. And she had 14 months of needing to prove to herself that the voice in her head that had always sounded like Marcus, "It won't work, be realistic, you're a dreamer," was not her voice. It had never been her voice. In month 2, she landed her first client, a boutique hotel in Midtown Atlanta that needed a complete brand overhaul. In month 3, she landed her second, a food and beverage company that had heard about her through the hotel. In month 4, she had 3 clients simultaneously and had hired her first employee, a recent SCAD graduate named Precious, who turned out to be exactly as good as her portfolio suggested. By month 8, Mensa Creative had 6 employees and a client list that included 2 nationally recognized brands and a nonprofit whose work Zola genuinely believed in. By month 12, she had moved out of the home office and into a proper studio space in Ponce City Market. By month 14, she was, by any objective measure, doing the best professional work of her life. And she had done all of it while also doing something that she had not planned and had not expected, and that had reorganized everything else around it. She had met Tobias Osei. She had not been looking. That was the first thing Adaze had said when Zola told her about him. The best ones always arrive when you're not looking. Zola had met Tobias in month 3, at a business conference in Atlanta where she had been presenting on brand strategy for emerging companies. He had been in the audience, not as a participant, but as a keynote speaker for the following day, a man who had agreed to attend the full conference as a courtesy to the organizers. He had found her afterward at the reception, not in the aggressive way of a man who saw an opening, in the specific way of someone who had heard something that genuinely interested him and wanted to continue the conversation. "Your framework for brand authenticity," he had said. "The distinction you drew between aspiration and identity. I've been thinking about that for my own company for 2 years, and I've never heard it articulated that precisely." She had looked at him. "What company?" "Osei Capital," he said. She had known the name. Anyone who had spent time in the Atlanta business community knew the name. Tobias Osei had built a private equity firm from nothing in his mid-20s and had expanded it over 15 years into one of the most significant investment vehicles in the Southeast. He was not famous in the way that required recognition. He was significant in the way that required competence. She had not been impressed by the name. She had been interested by the conversation. "That's the distinction I'm drawing," she told him. "Most companies build their brand around what they want people to think of them. The ones that last build it around what they actually are." And he had held her gaze. "Would you be willing to finish that conversation over dinner?" "Not tonight," she said. "I'm presenting at 8 tomorrow. Tomorrow night." She had smiled. "Give me your card." She had called him. Not because she was ready for anything. Because the conversation was genuinely interesting. And because she had spent 7 years being with a man who found her interesting in theory and diminishing in practice. And Tobias Osei was interested in a way that felt different from the very first dinner. Scene transition. They had not rushed. That was the thing she would always say about those early months. They had not rushed because neither of them needed to. He was not performing for her. She was not managing for him. And they were simply 2 people who had found each other at a moment when both of them were living completely on their own terms and discovered that their terms were compatible. He had been divorced 6 years earlier. A marriage that had ended without bitterness. 2 people who had grown in different directions and had the mutual respect to acknowledge it before it became something worse. He had 2 children from that marriage, twin boys, 3 years old, Kofi and Kwame, who were, from the first moment Zola met them, 7 months into her relationship with their father, exactly who they would always be. Kofi, who was louder and more immediate, who had decided within the first 20 minutes that Zola was someone worth knowing. Kwame, who was quieter and more observant, who had studied her for 3 weeks before appearing at her side one Sunday morning with a book he wanted read to him. She had read it, then another. then another. By month 10, she was reading to them every Sunday. By month 12, she had become, without announcement, the specific person they ran to when they needed something soft and steady. And she had not planned for any of it, and it had been the most surprising and most grounding thing that had happened to her in years. Then the invitation arrived, on a Thursday, in a cream envelope with gold-embossed lettering, and Zola Mensa, who had spent 14 months rebuilding everything Marcus Ashford had systematically dismantled, stood in her kitchen and read her ex-husband's wedding invitation and understood exactly what it was, and made a decision. She called Adaise first. This was always the order of things. Adaise answered on the second ring with the tone of someone who had been expecting a call they were not sure they wanted to receive. "You got it," Adaise said. "You knew? Precious from your office called me. She saw the envelope on your counter when she dropped off the files. She was concerned." "It's fine," Zola said. "It is not fine. He sent you a wedding invitation." "I know. To his wedding. To watch him marry the woman he left you for." "I'm aware." A pause. "What are you going to do?" Zola looked at the invitation on the kitchen counter, at her coffee going cold, at the twins' drawings on the refrigerator, Kofi's bold, overlapping, impossible to identify, Kwame's precise, careful, recognizable as what they were intended to be. "I'm going to go," she said, and the silence on the line was absolute. Then, "Zola, I'm going to go. I'm going to let Tobias take me on the jet. I'm going to take the twins because Marcus has never seen them, and I want him to understand in a single moment everything he walked away from." "The jet," Adaise repeated. Tobias offered. "He has a client in Charlotte that weekend anyway." "He said it makes sense." "He said it makes sense. He also said," Zola continued, and I'm quoting, "I think you should go. I think you should walk in there as exactly who you are. And I'd like to be beside you when you do it." Another silence. "I love him," Adaise said. "I know. Are you ready for what Marcus is going to feel when he sees you?" Zola looked at her reflection in the kitchen window. 14 months ago, she had stood in this kitchen and felt the specific, unmistakable sensation of a woman who has been reduced to nothing by someone who should have been protecting her. She did not feel that now. "I'm not going for Marcus," she said. "I'm going for me." She told Tobias that evening. They were at his house, a modern, quietly beautiful space in Buckhead that felt, like everything about him, considered rather than showy. She showed him the invitation. He read it once, said nothing for a moment, then looked up. "How do you feel?" "I feel," she said carefully, "like I want to go. Not to make a scene, not to ruin anything. I want to walk into that room and let him see who I am now. And I want him to understand that the woman he dismissed was never who he thought she was." Tobias studied her. "And the twins? If you're comfortable with it," she said, "I want them there. Not as a performance. Say I want them there because they're part of my life. The real life, not the life he told me I was living." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "They'll want to wear their good clothes." She laughed. Genuine, full. The laugh that had been missing from her life for 7 years and had come back in the first month of knowing him. "Then we'll let them wear their good clothes," she said. She told the twins the following Saturday. Or rather, she told them that they were going on a trip on a big airplane and that there would be a party with flowers and music and fancy food. Kwame had asked, with his characteristic precision, "Is it someone we know?" "Someone I used to know," Zola said. Kofi, already moving toward a different question. "Will there be cake?" "Almost certainly." Kofi was satisfied. Kwame looked at her for a moment longer. But then, "Are you okay about it?" He was 3 years old, and he asked if she was okay about it. She had pressed her hand to his face. "Yes," she said, "I'm more than okay," and she meant it. Marcus Ashford received her RSVP by email. One line, Zola Mensa and party of 3, attending. She had heard from Adais, who had heard from a mutual friend, that Marcus had shown Brittany the RSVP and that Brittany had asked who the party of 3 was. Marcus had apparently said he wasn't sure. That was the first moment he had understood, perhaps, that he had miscalculated something. He did not know what he had miscalculated. He would find out on a Saturday in June, when a private jet landed at Charlotte Douglas International Airport, and the door opened. And Zola Mensa descended the stairs in an ivory silk dress that was not a wedding dress, and not trying to be, but was, by any measure, the most elegant thing in that zip code. With a man beside her who moved through space the way certain men do when they have absolutely nothing to prove, and 2 3-year-old twins in matching navy suits, looking, both of them, like they owned the runway they were standing on. To understand what the wedding meant, you had to understand what the marriage had been. Not the surface. Everyone had seen the surface. Marcus and Zola Ashford at charity events. Marcus and Zola Ashford in the social pages of Atlanta magazines. Marcus and Zola Ashford at the kind of dinners where people who are doing well in specific ways gather to be seen doing well together. From the outside, the marriage looked like exactly what it was supposed to look like. From the inside, it looked different. It looked like a woman slowly learning to take up less space. The agency had been first. Marcus had not asked her to leave. He had been more sophisticated than that. He had planted doubt in her work, in her colleagues, in the industry itself. The way certain people plant doubt, with the patience of someone who understands that direct opposition creates resistance and sustained skepticism creates surrender. Your creative director doesn't really see your potential, he had said in year 2. You're too good for what they're offering you. The implication was always that she deserved more. The actual message was that what she had was not worth keeping. By year 3, she had left the agency and was attempting to build a studio from home with Marcus's encouragement, which came in the form of enthusiasm for the idea and constant skepticism of the execution. That client is below your value. Don't discount yourself. And then, when she raised her rates, I'm not sure the market is ready for that positioning. She could never price correctly, could never pitch correctly, could never market herself correctly. There was always a reason, delivered with apparent love, with apparent concern, with the specific language of a man who needed to believe he was protecting her from her own limitations. She had believed him for longer than she would ever fully forgive herself for. The creative voice had been second, not taken dramatically, not forbidden explicitly. It just consistently questioned until she learned to question it herself before he could. She had started every project with a period of doubt that had not existed before the marriage and that she had, for a long time, attributed to perfectionism. It was not perfectionism, it was the internalized voice of a man who needed her to be slightly less than him, who could not, she had come to understand, exist comfortably beside someone who was his equal, who had chosen her because her warmth and her talent and her presence made him look better, and who had spent 7 years systematically reducing those qualities to a manageable level. The confidence had been third, and fourth, and fifth, not all at once, in increments so small that she had not been able to see them while she was inside them. She had stopped arguing her own cases in meetings they attended together. She had started prefacing her opinions with, "I might be wrong, but..." She had begun reading his expression before she finished sentences to determine whether what she was saying was acceptable. She had, without deciding to, made his comfort the primary condition of her own expression. By year 6, she had not recognized herself in photographs, not physically, in the posture, in the particular way she was positioned beside him, smaller, angled toward him, taking up less of the frame. She had looked at a photograph from their 4th anniversary dinner and then at a photograph from their first year together, and the difference had been impossible to unsee. And in the first photograph, she had been standing beside him with the specific uprightness of a woman who knows exactly who she is. In the fourth anniversary photograph, she had been slightly turned, slightly diminished, slightly, and this was the word that had finally broken something open when it arrived. Arranged. She had been arranged. Around him. For his benefit, not because he had demanded it, because she had learned, gradually, that it was easier. The affair with Brittany had begun in year 6. She had not known during year 6. She had known in year 7, when the quality of his attention had shifted in the specific way that it shifts when someone is no longer investing in the present, because they have already committed to a different future. She had known, but had not named it. Thus, because naming it would have required her to face how much she had lost in the years it had been growing, and she was not yet ready for that, until the coffee conversation, until the divorce, until 14 months of rebuilding had given her enough distance to see the 7 years clearly, and to understand that what had been done to her was not something she had caused. It was something she had survived, and surviving it had made her something she had not been before. Not stronger in the obvious way, clearer, about who she was, about what she was worth, about what she would never again allow to be done to her in the name of love. She had not told Marcus about the twins, not because she was hiding them, because they were not his to know about. They were Tobias's children, and Tobias's children. The 14 months since she had known them, had become the clearest evidence she had of what love actually looked like when it was not deployed as a management strategy. Kofi, who ran at her when she arrived at their house, at full speed, with no concern for the dignity of either of them. Kwame, who appeared beside her quietly, who took her hand when they were walking somewhere new, who asked her things that required her to think carefully before she answered, who had looked at her 2 months earlier with the particular directness of a 3-year-old who does not yet know that people are not supposed to say exactly what they mean, and said, "Zola, are you going to be here forever?" She had held his gaze. "I'm going to be here for a very long time," she had said. Kwame had considered this. "That's good," he had said. "Well, because Kofi likes you and I like you and Daddy likes you the most." She had pressed her lips together. "Tell your daddy I like him the most, too." Kwame had nodded, very seriously, as though delivering a message of state. "I will," he had said, and had gone back to his book. These were the children who were going to arrive at Marcus Ashford's wedding in matching navy suits. The children who represented everything she had found in the 14 months since he had decided she was not worth keeping. He had invited her to watch him move on. She was going to arrive having already moved, and having moved further than he had the imagination to anticipate. The first thing she had understood about Tobias was that he did not need her to be less than herself. This sounds simple. It was not simple. And after 7 years of a marriage in which her competence was consistently managed downward, the experience of being with someone who responded to her excellence with something that looked like relief, finally someone who can actually do this, had required adjustment. She had waited for the other shoe. For the first 6 months, she had been waiting. For the moment when his enthusiasm for her work would curdle into the kind of subtle competition that had defined her marriage. It had not come. "Why don't you compete with me?" she had asked him once, directly, in the specific way she had learned to ask direct questions when she needed real answers. He had looked at her with the expression of someone encountering a question that had not occurred to them. "Because you're not competing with me," he said. You're doing something different from what I do, entirely." "Why would I compete with that? Marcus competed with me." "Then Marcus was frightened of you," Tobias said. "That's not competition. That's fear." She had sat with that. Fear. 7 years of what she had experienced as judgment and skepticism and management was, in Tobias's reading, fear. She was not sure if that made it better or worse. "Does it change anything?" she asked. understanding it as fear. Tobias was quiet for a moment. "It changes what you carry," he said. "You stop carrying it as evidence of your inadequacy, and you start carrying it as evidence of his. That's a significant difference." He had been building his firm for 15 years. He spoke about it the way people speak about something they have invested in so completely that it has become part of their identity without consuming it. With pride, but without defensiveness. With knowledge, but without the need to perform it. He had money in the way that certain people have it, without requiring anyone else to know about it, without deploying it as a social instrument. The jet existed because his travel schedule made it practical, not because it made him feel important. He had, more than once, declined an upgrade or chosen a smaller venue or eaten at an unremarkable restaurant because the food was good or the conversation was better suited to a quieter space. Marcus had always needed the room to know what he was. Tobias appeared indifferent to whether the room knew anything about him at all. He had told her, 3 months into their relationship, about his marriage. They were at dinner in a place he liked specifically because it had bad lighting and good wine and nobody came there to be seen. "We were wrong for each other from the beginning," he said. Not with bitterness. With the specific honesty of someone who had processed something until it became simply true. Not in ways that were obvious. In the ways that take years to reveal themselves. She was building a life that required one thing. I was building a life that required something incompatible. "Did you know before the wedding?" "I suspected," he said. I chose not to look directly at it. Why? Because I was 32, and I was in love, and I believed that love was sufficient to bridge incompatibility. He looked at his glass. "It isn't." "What is?" He looked up. "Alignment," he said. People who want the same things in the same direction at the same time. Love is necessary. It isn't sufficient. She thought about Marcus. About 7 years of loving someone who had needed her to want things she didn't want, in directions she hadn't chosen. "Yes," she said. "You understand that," Tobias said. Not as a question. "I understand it now." He held her gaze. "Then we're both people who learned something difficult the hard way," he said. "That puts us at roughly the same starting point." She looked at him across the table, in the bad lighting, with the good wine, with nobody watching. "Is that where we're starting?" she asked. He smiled. "I think we've already started," he said. "I'm just naming it." The twins had accepted her in the specific way of children who have not yet learned to complicate acceptance. So Kofi had accepted her in month 1 by simply deciding she was someone worth including in whatever he was doing. Kwame had accepted her in month 4 by handing her a book. By month 7, she was part of the rhythm of their household in the particular way of someone who had not forced their way in, but had simply arrived consistently at the times when she said she would arrive with the attention she said she would bring. Children, she had discovered, were excellent judges of this. They did not respond to performance. They responded to consistency. She was consistent. And they had responded accordingly. She had loved the twins before she had been ready to say she loved their father. Or rather, she had understood that she loved their father through loving them. Because Tobias Osei was, in part, made visible by the children he had raised. The patience he had with Kwame's questions. The way he contained his energy to match Kofi's without diminishing either of them. The way he spoke to them as though their understanding mattered, as though their perspectives were worth hearing, as though small people were still people. She had watched him parent and understood, without needing it explained, that this was a man whose care was not conditional, who did not love strategically, who was not managing, who was simply present and consistent and safe. The night before the wedding, they were in the hotel suite in Charlotte that Tobias had arranged with the specific efficiency of someone for whom logistics were never the complicating factor. The twins were asleep in the adjoining room. Zola was at the window looking at the Charlotte skyline. Tobias came to stand beside her. He did not ask if she was nervous. He asked, "What do you want tomorrow to feel like?" She thought about it. "Like I'm walking into a room where I used to feel small," she said, "as the person I actually am." "Then that's what it will feel like," he said. "You don't know that." "I know you," he said, "and I know that the person you actually are is more than sufficient for any room." She looked at him. "Even his?" "Especially his," Tobias said, "because he spent 7 years not seeing it, and tomorrow he will. And that's not revenge." He paused. "That's just the truth becoming visible." She turned back to the window. The city glittered below them. Kofi and Kwame were asleep in the next room. The morning was coming, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she was not afraid of what it would bring. Kofi woke at 6:15 with the unerring accuracy of a child whose internal clock recognized opportunity. He appeared in the doorway of the master suite in his pajamas, his face carrying the expression of someone who had been awake long enough to have formed a plan. "Is it time?" he asked. "Not yet," Tobias said from the bed without opening his eyes. "Is it almost time?" "Go back to sleep, Kofi." "I'm not tired, I know. Go anyway." Kofi looked at Zola. She was sitting at the vanity, already awake, already beginning the process of the morning. "Zola, is it almost time?" "In a few hours," she said. "Will there be cake?" "Absolutely." Kofi accepted this with satisfaction and retreated to the other room. 5 minutes later, Kwame appeared. Quieter. Standing at the edge of the doorway. "Good morning," Zola said. "Good morning." He studied her for a moment. "You look nice." "Thank you. I'm not ready yet." "You look nice already." She turned from the mirror to look at him properly. This child, this small, precise, entirely himself child, who had decided months ago that she was someone worth knowing, and had not wavered from that assessment since. "Come here," she said. He came. She held him for a moment. He allowed it with the particular dignity of a 3-year-old who does not require physical affection to be effusive to be genuine. "Are you nervous?" he asked. She pulled back and looked at his face. "A little," she said honestly, because she had decided early that honesty with these children was non-negotiable. "About what?" "Seeing someone I used to know." Kwame considered this with the gravity it deserved. "Is it someone who was mean to you?" She paused. "Not in ways that were obvious," she said. "In ways that took time to understand." He nodded slowly. "Daddy says the hard things to understand are usually the important ones." She pressed her lips together. "Your daddy is right about that." "I'll be there," Kwame said. "If you need someone to hold your hand." She looked at this child, this absolute, specific, irreplaceable child. "Thank you," she said. "That helps more than you know." He nodded once, with finality, then went to get dressed. They left the hotel at 11. The wedding was at noon, at an estate in Dilworth that Marcus had presumably chosen for its impressiveness. High ceilings, formal gardens, the kind of venue that announces itself as the backdrop of something significant. Tobias had arranged a car, not a limousine. Saw not anything designed to announce arrival. A clean, black, understated SUV driven by a man named James, who had been with Tobias's household for 9 years and who greeted the twins by name and had a bag of snacks for the drive that he produced with the timing of someone who had done this before. Kwame climbed in with his book. Kofi climbed in and immediately asked James about the snacks. Zola sat in the back beside Tobias. He looked at her once. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The estate appeared at the end of a long driveway lined with white flowers. Guests were still arriving. Clusters of people in formal wear moving toward the entrance. Valet staff. A string quartet visible through the ground floor windows. The particular choreography of an expensive wedding executed with precision. And the SUV moved through the arrival lane. Zola watched through the window. She recognized some faces, former friends, couples they had socialized with during the marriage, people who had attended their own wedding 14 years ago and were now here to attend his second. "You ready?" Tobias asked quietly. "Yes," she said. And she was. Not in the performed way of someone who has decided to project confidence, in the specific way of someone who has had 14 months to become exactly who they were supposed to be and has arrived at that destination fully. The car stopped. James opened the door. Tobias stepped out first, then turned and offered her his hand. She took it and stepped out into the June morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a cream silk dress that was not trying to be a wedding dress and did not need to try, with Tobias Ose beside her and two 3-year-old twins in matching navy suits spilling out of the car behind her. Looking, all 4 of them, like people who had exactly the right amount of places to be. Music, a held breath, the moment before everything. The valet saw them first. Then the guests near the entrance. Then, in the particular way that awareness spreads through a gathered crowd, a ripple moved through the people on the steps. Not dramatic, just people noticing. Because certain combinations of things announce themselves without requiring announcement. A woman with the specific posture of someone who has moved through difficulty and come out on the other side of it knowing exactly who she is. A man beside her who occupied space with the particular ease of someone who has long since stopped needing to establish anything. 2 small boys in matching navy suits who were, at this precise moment, debating between themselves whether the white flowers along the driveway were real. "They're real," Kwame said. "How do you know?" Kofi demanded. "Because fake flowers don't smell like anything." Kofi leaned toward the nearest arrangement and inhaled dramatically. "They smell like flowers," he confirmed. "That's what I said. I thought they might be special fake flowers. There are no special fake flowers." The guests near the entrance had stopped their conversations. Some of them recognized Zola. And she could see it in the specific adjustment of their expressions. The recalibration that happened when someone appeared in a context that required updating everything they thought they knew about them. She did not rush her entrance. She did not perform it. She simply walked in as exactly who she was, at the pace that suited her, with the people who had come with her. One of the wedding coordinators approached. "Ms. Mensah?" "Yes. We have you at table 7. A pause as the coordinator registered the full party. "And you're—" "My partner and our sons," Zola said, calmly, simply, with the specific confidence of someone for whom this sentence required no clarification. The coordinator smiled. "Of course. Right this way." The reception hall was beautiful, white flowers everywhere, the string quartet playing something classical and warm, and the light coming through tall windows in the specific way of June afternoons that have decided to be generous. The room was arranged for 200 guests. Most of them were already seated. The ceremony was 20 minutes away. Zola, Tobias, Kofi, and Kwame were escorted to table 7, which was, she noticed with the particular attention of someone who understood that nothing at an event like this was accidental, positioned directly in the sight line of the head table. Marcus had placed her where he could see her. He had wanted to watch her face during his wedding. She sat down, smoothed her dress, looked at the floral centerpiece. Kofi had immediately located the place settings and was examining the salad fork with the specific interest of someone who had not seen this particular implement before. "It's a fork," Kwame told him. "It's a small fork. For salad. Why does salad get a smaller fork? Because salad is smaller than dinner." Kofi appeared to find this logical. Tobias leaned slightly toward Zola. "He's going to see us when he comes in," he said quietly. "I know. How do you feel?" She looked at the entrance where guests were still arriving, at the flowers and the light and the 200 people who had gathered to witness Marcus Ashford begin his next chapter. "I feel," she said, "like someone who is exactly where she is supposed to be." Marcus saw her 11 minutes later. He came in through the side entrance with his groomsmen, the specific entrance that wedding protocols had designated for the groom's party. He was scanning the room, not anxiously, with the proprietary satisfaction of a man surveying a space arranged for his benefit, and his gaze moved across the seated guests in the efficient way of someone taking attendance. And then it stopped, at table 7, at the woman in cream silk, at the man beside her who was saying something that made her smile in a way that Marcus, across the room, found immediately disorienting, at 2 small boys in matching navy suits, one of whom was now apparently explaining something to the other with great urgency, using the salad fork as a visual aid. The expression on Marcus Ashford's face in the 11 seconds before he recovered his composure was something that several people at nearby tables would describe later to their spouses, their friends, their group chats, with variations of the same word: undone. He looked undone, not angry, so not confrontational, undone. Like a man who had sent an invitation expecting one thing and was looking at something that existed entirely outside the parameters of his expectation. One of his groomsmen said something. Marcus nodded without turning away from table 7. Then he turned and proceeded with the business of his wedding. Zola had watched. She had not made it obvious that she was watching, but she had seen everything, and what she felt in those 11 seconds was not triumph, was not satisfaction, was something quieter and more complete. The specific feeling of a woman who has spent 14 months becoming exactly who she was always meant to be, in a room where the person who most tried to prevent that becoming was present to witness it. Not for revenge, for completion. "I'm ready to get married," Kofi announced to the table. "You're 3, Kwame said. "I'll do it when I'm older. You haven't met anyone. I'll meet them when I'm older too." Tobias looked at Zola. She looked at him. And in the middle of Marcus Ashford's wedding at table 7, in a room full of 200 people, they said everything that needed to be said without a single word. The ceremony was beautiful. She would say this honestly and without irony when a daze asked her about it afterward. The flowers were extraordinary. The vows were personal. Brittany was visibly radiant in the specific way of a woman who has gotten exactly what she wanted and is not attempting to conceal her happiness about it. Marcus had done well with the details. He had always been good at details. It was the substance underneath the details that had always been the problem. And Zola watched the ceremony with the attention of someone who had once stood in a similar position and made similar promises, and had spent 7 years learning what promises looked like when they were maintained and what they looked like when they were performed. She held no bitterness. This was the thing she would find most difficult to explain to people later, that she had sat in that room and watched her ex-husband marry someone else and had not felt bitterness, had felt instead something closer to clarity. This was who Marcus was. This was what he needed: a different woman, a different arrangement, a different set of terms. And she was not that woman, had never been that woman, had tried for 7 years to become something close to it, and had, in the trying, become someone she did not recognize. The other person she recognized was the one sitting at table 7. "Zola," Kwame said quietly from beside her. She looked at him. He held up his hand. She took it. They sat like that through the remainder of the ceremony, her hand in his small hand, looking at the flowers, listening to the vows. The reception was where Marcus found his way to her. She had expected it. He came during the cocktail hour when the room had dispersed into clusters and the string quartet had been replaced by a jazz band, and the particular social geometry of a wedding reception had created enough movement for him to approach table 7 without it looking like the intention it was. He was composed when he arrived. Whatever the 11 seconds of undone had been, he had put it away. He looked good. She registered this without particular feeling. and he had always been good-looking in the specific way that required maintenance. "Zola," he said. She looked up from her conversation with Tobias. "Marcus," she said. "Congratulations." He held her gaze for a moment. "You came." "I did. I wasn't sure you would." "IRSVPD." A pause. His eyes moved to Tobias. Something in the movement was careful. "Marcus Ashford," she said. "This is Tobias Osei." The two men looked at each other, not with hostility, with the particular assessment of men who are taking each other's measure in a social context that does not permit directness. Tobias extended his hand. "Congratulations on your wedding," he said. Warm, genuine, utterly without performance. "Thank you," Marcus said. He looked at the twins. Kofi had found the breadbasket and was conducting what appeared to be a structural analysis of a dinner roll. Kwame was reading. "Your sons?" Marcus asked. "Not to Zola." The question was slightly misaligned, directed at neither of them specifically. "Mine," Tobias said simply. "They're great kids," Marcus said. "Yes," Tobias agreed. "They are." Marcus looked at Zola. She looked back at him. There was a moment, not dramatic, not confrontational. The specific moment when two people who shared a significant history look at each other across the distance of everything that has changed and both understand, simultaneously, that the change is complete. "You look well," Marcus said. "I am well," she said, genuinely. He nodded. Something in his expression did something she had not expected. It softened, not into remorse, not into regret, into something more honest than either of those, into recognition. "I know," he said quietly. "I can see that." He held her gaze for one more moment. Then he nodded at Tobias, at the twins, at the table that contained everything she had become in the months since he had decided she was not worth keeping. "Enjoy the evening," he said. And he walked back toward his wife, and Zola watched him go, and felt, in the watching, the specific and complete sensation of a chapter that has ended cleanly, not with drama, with the quiet authority of something that is simply finished. Tobias called at 10:45 that night. The twins were asleep in the hotel room. Tobias was in the shower. Zola was at the window in the robe that had become, over the past year, the particular comfort of hotel windows at night in cities that were not home but felt safe anyway. "Tell me everything," Daisy said. So she did. The arrival, the coordinator, or table 7, Kofi and the salad fork, Kwame holding her hand through the ceremony, Marcus's face when he first saw them, the cocktail hour conversation, the moment of recognition. When she finished, Daisy was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel?" "Like I went somewhere I was afraid of and discovered there was nothing left to be afraid of." "That's it? That's everything." Zola looked at the city. "I thought it would feel bigger, more dramatic. I thought I'd feel something more triumphant or crushed. One of the two. But I don't feel either." A pause. "I feel settled." "Settled," Daisy repeated. "Like the thing I was carrying from the marriage finally put itself down. Not because of the wedding, not because of seeing him, because I walked into that room as exactly who I am now, and I understood that who I am now has nothing to do with him." Daisy was quiet for a moment, then, "I've been waiting for you to say that." "I know." "Not the words, the truth of it. You could have said it 6 months ago, but it wouldn't have been true yet." "No," Zola agreed. "It wouldn't have." "What about Tobias?" Daisy asked. Zola looked toward the bathroom door. "What about him?" "Don't do that." "You know what?" She smiled. "He asked me," she said, "what I wanted the day to feel like, before we went. And I said I wanted to walk into a room where I used to feel small as the person I actually am. And that's what it felt like." She paused. "And a significant part of the reason it felt that way is that he was there. Not because he made me feel more, because he made me feel like myself. That's the difference, Adaze said. Yes, Zola agreed. That's exactly the difference. Do you love him? The question settled in the room with the particular weight of something that has been true for a while, but has not yet been said in exactly that formation. Yes, Zola said. Not performing the certainty, simply stating it. Have you told him? Not in those words. When are you going to? She looked at the bathroom door, at the city below, at the reflection of a woman in a hotel window who was 39 years old and had spent 14 months becoming someone she was proud to be. Soon, she said. Zola. Tonight, she said. That's better. When Tobias came out of the shower, she was still at the window. He came to stand beside her, the city below them, Charlotte at night. How are you? He asked. I'm going to tell you something, she said. He waited. I love you, she said. I've known it for a while. I wanted to say it at the right time. Oh, he was quiet for a moment. Then he took her hand. I've been waiting for you to be ready, he said. I didn't want to say it before you were. She looked at him. Were you waiting long? About 6 months, he said. 6 months. I'm patient, he said, in important things. She turned toward him. I know you are, she said. That's one of the things I love. He held her gaze. I love you too, he said. Completely, in the specific way of someone who has looked at you clearly and is not managing anything. She understood what he meant. She understood it in her body as well as her mind. The difference between love that required her to be less and love that required her to be exactly herself. The difference had taken her 39 years to understand, and now she understood it completely, and she was not going to forget it. 18 months after the wedding. Mensa Creative had 12 employees. The client list included 4 nationally recognized brands, 2 international companies that had found their way to her through referrals, and a non-profit portfolio that she protected with the specific fierceness of someone who understood that some work was not about revenue. She had been featured in Atlanta Magazine's annual list of creative entrepreneurs to watch. She had been invited to speak at SCAD, her alma mater, on the subject of building a brand identity in markets that were not designed with your demographic in mind. She had declined the first invitation because the timing conflicted with Kofi's birthday. She had accepted the second. She had taken the twins to Savannah for the weekend after. Tobias had proposed in month 16. Not dramatically, not with a production. At the kitchen table in Atlanta on a Sunday morning while Kwame was reading and Kofi was explaining to the dog, a recent addition to the household named Atlas, why dogs should be allowed on furniture. Zola, Tobias had said. She had looked up from her coffee. He had a ring on the table between them. Not presented, just placed there. Available. I've been thinking about the right moment, he said, and I've decided there isn't one. There's just the moment I'm in with you, and all of them are right. She looked at the ring. At him. Is that a yes? Kofi asked from across the room. You're supposed to be talking to the dog, Kwame said. Atlas doesn't care about the answer, Kofi said. I do. Zola had laughed, full and genuine, and the kind that arrived without warning and stayed too long. Yes, she said. Eat to Tobias, to the ring, to the kitchen on a Sunday morning, to all of it. Finally, Kofi said. You knew? Zola asked. He practiced, Kwame said, without looking up from his book. In the mirror, Kofi confirmed. I watched. Tobias pressed his hand to his face. Zola laughed harder. The dog barked. And the Sunday morning continued, unremarkable and perfect, in the specific way of things that are exactly as they should be. She had not spoken to Marcus since the wedding. Not from hostility, from completion. There was nothing remaining between them that required words. The divorce had handled what the marriage had produced in terms of legal and financial reality. The 14 months had handled what the marriage had produced in terms of psychological reality. The rest was simply the past. And the past, she had learned, I was most useful when it was understood clearly and not carried forward. She had understood it clearly. She did not carry it forward. Adaise was the matron of honor at the wedding, which was small, 40 people. A garden in Atlanta on an October afternoon when the light was the particular gold of that season. Kwame was the ring bearer. He performed this role with the gravity of a head of state delivering a treaty document. Kofi was supposed to be the ring bearer's assistant. He spent most of the ceremony examining a beetle he had found near the rose bushes. When the officiant reached the part about love and partnership and the choice to build a life deliberately with another person, Zola looked at Tobias and thought about everything that had been required to arrive at this specific October afternoon. The marriage that had made her smaller, the divorce that had returned her to herself, the 14 months that had built her into someone she was proud to be, the phone call from Adaise at 10:45 after the wedding, the Sunday morning proposal, the twins who had decided, without being asked, that she belonged. All of it. Required. Every piece of it. I do, she said, and meant it in the specific way of someone who understood exactly what the words required. She heard about it from Adaise, who heard it from a mutual friend, who had attended a dinner at which Marcus Ashford had been present and had been asked about his first wife. He had apparently been quiet for a moment. Then he had said, "She was the most capable person I've ever known. I spent 7 years not seeing it clearly." The friend who reported this said it did not sound like regret. It sounded like acknowledgement. Zola had listened to this account and had thought about it for exactly the amount of time it deserved, which was not very long, because his acknowledgement was not hers to manage. What he had understood was his own. What she had built was hers. Those were separate things, and keeping them separate, not from anger, from the clear-eyed understanding that his evolution was not her responsibility, was something she had learned in the 14 months. You could feel compassion for someone who had harmed you without making their growth the project of your life. You could understand why someone had been the way they had been without excusing the damage. You could move forward completely without requiring them to be different first. And she had moved forward, completely. The acknowledgement was nice, in the way that evidence of someone's growth is always nice, but it was not necessary. She had not needed it to be free. She had been free since the night she stood in Adaise's kitchen the day the divorce was final and said, "I need to build something." She had built it. And what she had built needed nothing from Marcus Ashford to stand. It stood on its own, with Tobias beside her, with the twins, who were now 4, and who had specific opinions about everything, with Mensa Creative and its 12 employees, and its wall of work that she was genuinely proud of, with the Saturday mornings, and the Sunday readings, and the kitchen table, and the dog named Atlas who had decided that Kofi was correct. Dogs should absolutely be allowed on furniture. With the specific, earned, the unspectacular completeness of a life that had been built deliberately, from the rubble of what had been taken, and from the clarity of what had always been there, waiting to be recognized. 2 years after the cream envelope arrived on a Thursday morning. She is 41 years old. Mensa Creative is in its 3rd year and is, by every measure she had once dreamed of, what she had always known she could build if she had been given the conditions to build it. She had given herself the conditions. That was the thing she returned to most often when she thought about the arc of everything. Not that the right circumstances had appeared. Not that the right man had appeared. Not that the divorce had freed her. She had given herself the conditions. By leaving the agency, she should not have left. By building the studio, she had always known she was capable of. By responding to the conference invitation. By calling Tobias after he gave her his card. By showing up to the therapy she had started in month 2 and had continued through the entire year of rebuilding, by responding to the wedding invitation in a way that was not about Marcus, but about herself, by saying yes to the Sunday mornings and the twins and the October afternoon, by standing at the window in Charlotte the night before the wedding and allowing herself to want exactly what was in front of her. She had given herself the conditions. The rest had followed. Kwame asked her once, he was 4 by then, with the expanded vocabulary and the unchanged precision, why she had a picture of Charlotte on her phone's screensaver. Now, she had taken a photograph from the tarmac of the airport, the morning after the wedding, she and Tobias and the twins walking back to the jet, the twins' navy suits slightly rumpled from the day, Kofi holding her hand and Kwame holding his father's. The sky, the specific blue of a June morning that has decided to be generous. Because something important happened there, she said. What happened? She thought about how to explain it. I figured out who I was, she said, in a room where someone had expected me to feel small. Kwame considered this. And you didn't feel small, not even a little. He nodded with his characteristic gravity. Good, he said, then went back to his book. She looked at the photograph, the blue sky, the 4 of them walking, not a moment designed for a photograph, just a moment that had been so specifically right that her instinct had been to capture it before it was gone. She had captured it, and kept it, because it represented something that she wanted to remember, not the wedding. What she had brought to the wedding, who she had been when she walked in, who she remained when she walked out. The specific, earned, unshakable knowledge of a woman who had been told for 7 years who she was by someone who needed her to be smaller, and had spent 14 months proving, not to him, to herself, that the version of her he had constructed was fiction. And the woman walking across a Charlotte tarmac on a June morning in a cream silk dress with the sun in her face, and her people around her. That was the truth. Zola Mensa was invited to a wedding to feel small, and she arrived as herself. And that specific, quiet, total completeness was not the result of the billionaire or the jet or the twins in their matching navy suits or the expression on Marcus Ashford's face when he saw the woman he had spent 7 years reducing standing in his wedding venue in full possession of everything she had always been. It was the result of 14 months, of 5 o'clock mornings, of phone calls returned, of therapy sessions that were not glamorous and conferences that were not guaranteed and clients that were not certain, of choosing every single day to build the life she deserved rather than the life she had been told she should accept. The wedding was the moment people will remember. The 14 months are the story. If you are building something right now that someone close to you is telling you is not worth building, if you have been made to feel small in a room where you should have been celebrated, if you have an invitation, literal or metaphorical, to go somewhere that once made you feel like less, go as exactly who you are. You might be surprised how large the room looks from the other side. Hit the like button. Leave a comment telling me where you are watching from and whether you have had your own version of a wedding invitation, a moment when you were expected to feel small and refused to. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe with notifications on, because every week I bring you stories of people who showed up as exactly themselves in rooms that expected them to be less. I will see you in the next one.